She was never supposed to be his answer. A exhausted billionaire widower boards a first-class flight with his screaming 5-month-old son, desperately trying to survive the chaos. A humble pediatric nurse named Olivia has no choice but to help, never expecting that one moment of kindness would spiral into an obsession that shakes the foundations of his empire. When Ethan refuses to let her go, and Stephen realizes he's found the only woman who can heal his broken world, the question becomes unavoidable. Is he falling in love with her, or the way she loves his son? As powerful in-laws threaten custody, paparazzi hunt for her identity, and someone tries to snatch the baby, Olivia must choose between protecting her heart or becoming the mother Ethan chose for her. A story about second chances, unexpected love, and the baby who chose her first. Don't miss the moment everything changes. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell. The turbulence hit like a punch to the gut, and Ethan's scream pierced through the cabin of the first-class section like a siren. Stephen Smith gripped the armrest of his seat, his jaw clenching as the 5-month-old's little fists flailed against the air, inconsolable despite the bottle, despite the gentle rocking, despite every trick the pediatrician had mentioned. Around them, a handful of first-class passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their irritation becoming a tangible thing in the recycled cabin air. "Sir, perhaps we should move to the back galley," a flight attendant suggested, her smile strained at the edges. Stephen knew what that meant. Get your child away from these people. He stood abruptly, cradling Ethan against his chest, feeling the familiar weight of helplessness settle over his shoulders like a suffocating blanket. This was supposed to be manageable. He'd flown 1,000 times. What was one cross-country flight with an infant? Apparently, it was everything he wasn't prepared for. As he moved toward the galley, a woman glanced up from her seat. She had warm brown eyes, the kind that seemed to hold entire lifetimes of patience, and her dark curls were pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was watching him, not with annoyance like everyone else, but with something else. Concern, maybe. Recognition of a fellow human drowning. "The baby's distressed," the flight attendant said softly, her words directed at Olivia Johnson but her eyes on Stephen. "Ma'am, would you please try holding him? Just for a moment? He seems calmer when he looks at you." Olivia hesitated. She'd been on a long medical outreach mission in West Africa for 6 months, and all she wanted was silence and her own bed. She didn't want complications. She didn't want to get involved. But Ethan's cries were becoming more frantic, and the father looked like he was seconds away from a complete breakdown. "Okay," she said quietly, unbuckling her seatbelt. Stephen approached her warily, a man used to controlling every variable suddenly desperate for any intervention. "I'm sorry," he said, though she hadn't asked for an apology. "He's been like this since we took off. His nanny was supposed to come with us, but there was a last-minute emergency in the family, and He stopped himself, realizing he was rambling. "Thank you." She took Ethan from his arms, and something shifted in the baby's body immediately. His cries didn't stop, but they softened into whimpers, his wet eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made Stephen's breath catch. He watched as Olivia settled the baby against her chest, swaying slightly, humming something low and indistinct. It took 3 minutes for Ethan to stop crying entirely. 7 passengers were visibly relieved. Stephen stood frozen, watching a stranger soothe his son with a gentleness he hadn't known he desperately needed to witness. The turbulence intensified without warning. The plane bucked, and an overhead compartment popped open. Passengers gasped. Ethan's eyes went wide, and he started screaming again, a primal, terrified sound that no 5-month-old should be capable of producing. "It's okay," Olivia whispered, but the baby was spiraling, his little body rigid with fear. She looked up at Stephen, and in that moment, something passed between them, an unspoken agreement. Desperation knows no boundaries. "Come with me," she said, standing with Ethan. Stephen followed her to the galley, a private corner away from the other passengers. She found the lavatory and locked the door behind them, creating a small enclosed space that somehow felt safer than the chaos outside. Ethan's screams continued, his face turning red, his body shaking with terror. Olivia made a decision that would change all of their lives. She pulled up her shirt and positioned Ethan against her breast. It was unconventional. It was intimate in a way that should have felt wrong. But the moment Ethan latched, The moment he felt that primal comfort, everything stopped. His screams became gasps. His gasps became heavy breathing. Within minutes, he was asleep, his tiny fist relaxed against her skin, his face peaceful in a way that made Stephen's chest tighten, so hard he thought it might break. Stephen stared at them through the small bathroom mirror. His son, peaceful and safe in the arms of a woman he'd never met an hour ago. There was something almost sacred about the moment. Something that felt like a prayer being answered. "Thank you," he whispered, and the words felt impossibly inadequate. Olivia kept her eyes closed, feeling the weight of Ethan's sleeping body against her. She could feel Stephen's gaze on her, could feel the intensity of his gratitude, his desperation, his need. She wanted to tell him it was nothing. She wanted to tell him to call his nanny, his mother, his pediatrician. But she didn't. She simply stood there, letting this broken man find whatever solace he needed in the belief that she had fixed something for him. When the plane finally landed in Ohio, and the passengers deplaned, Stephen found her before she could slip away into the crowd. His hair was disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled, and his eyes had that glazed look of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks, maybe months. "I need to thank you properly," he said. "Please. Coffee, lunch, anything." Olivia shouldered her bag and shook her head gently. "I'm glad he's okay. That's what matters." She looked at Ethan, who was sleeping peacefully in Stephen's arms, his tiny face relaxed and content. "Take care of him." She walked away without looking back, disappearing into the terminal with the kind of finality that felt permanent. Stephen wanted to follow her, wanted to demand her name, her number, something to anchor this moment to reality. But he didn't. He simply held his sleeping son and tried to convince himself that the universe didn't work that way, that one person couldn't change everything. 2 weeks later, Olivia was working her shift at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital when a commotion rippled through the pediatric ward. She was in the medication station, reviewing charts, when she heard it. The distinctive sound of his voice, low and controlled, giving instructions to someone about paperwork and appointments. She froze. No, it couldn't be. But when she turned the corner, there he was. Stephen Smith, looking infinitely more pulled together than he had on the airplane. His charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his dark hair groomed, his expression professional and composed. And in his arms, swaddled in an expensive blanket, was Ethan, wearing a tiny outfit that probably cost more than Olivia's entire paycheck. The moment Ethan saw her, everything changed. His face broke into the biggest smile Olivia had ever seen on an infant's face. He began to wiggle and coo, his little arms reaching toward her with a desperation that mirrored his father's. The baby practically hurled himself toward her, forcing Stephen to shift his grip or risk dropping him. "Gentle, buddy," Stephen said, but he made no move to stop the baby. His eyes had found hers, and they held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Mr. Smith?" she said carefully, as if she didn't recognize him, as if her heart wasn't suddenly racing. "You remember," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Hard to forget," she replied, keeping her tone professional. "Dr. Henderson will be right with you for Ethan's checkup." She started to move past them, but Stephen stepped into her path, not aggressively, just deliberately. "Your name?" he said. "I realized I never got your name." "Olivia." She didn't offer her last name. Something told her that would be dangerous. "If you'll excuse me." "Olivia." He said it like he was committing it to memory, burning it into his brain. "I want to hire you." She turned back to look at him, her eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry. As Ethan's caretaker. Part-time or full-time, whatever works. He clearly responds to you in a way he doesn't respond to anyone else. My last nanny quit 3 days ago because he wouldn't stop crying. Our housekeeper says he pushes away formula unless I'm the one giving it to him. But you..." He looked at his son, then back at her. "He chose you." "Mr. Smith." "Stephen." "Stephen," she repeated, the word feeling strange in her mouth. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't work for. I work at the hospital. That's my job. I'll pay you 3 times what you make here. I'm not interested in money." "Then what are you interested in?" His voice had shifted, become quieter, more dangerous somehow. "Tell me what would convince you." Olivia felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing, pressing against her chest. She could feel the way Ethan was reaching for her, the way his little fingers kept grasping at the air. She could feel the raw need radiating off this man in waves. The need for someone to fix his life, to fix his broken family, to fix him. "I can't help you," she said quietly, and she walked away before he could respond. But Stephen Smith was not a man accustomed to hearing the word no. Over the next 3 weeks, he became impossible to avoid. He showed up at the pediatric clinic on her days off, requesting appointments he didn't need. He appeared at the coffee shop where she grabbed her morning latte, ordering the same thing she ordered. He volunteered at the community center where she spent her evenings, helping underprivileged children access basic medical care. He wasn't aggressive about it. He was just present. "You're stalking me," Olivia said one morning when she found him waiting outside the clinic, Ethan in a high-end stroller, looking genuinely confused about why he was there. "Ethan wanted to see you," Stephen replied smoothly. "He's not sleeping well. Dr. Chin suggested it might be separation anxiety." "Dr. Chin said that. Or you paid Dr. Chin to say that. Does it matter?" His eyes held hers with an honesty that was almost aggressive in its intensity. "You're helping. He's calmer when he sees you. That's the only thing that matters." "Stephen," she said his name like a warning. "This is not healthy behavior." "Watching my son suffer is not healthy behavior," he countered. "I'm trying to fix that. And you're the only variable that seems to help. So I'll be at every coffee shop, every clinic, every volunteer shift until you agree to this job." She should have reported him. She should have called security. But there was something in his expression that stopped her. Something that spoke of a man drowning, of a father willing to debase himself, willing to chase a stranger through the streets of Ohio because his child needed her. One evening, she found him sitting alone on the bench outside the hospital, holding Ethan as the sun began to set. The baby was sleeping, but Stephen was awake, his expression haunted in a way that made her chest ache. She sat down beside him without asking permission. "His mother died," he said without preamble. 18 months ago. Drunk driver. She was coming to pick me up from a work event." He didn't look at Olivia. His eyes were fixed on his son's face. "I should have driven myself. I should have picked her up. I should have, 1,000 things I should have done differently." Olivia didn't speak. She simply waited. "After she died, I convinced myself I could do this alone. That I could be enough. But I can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't sleep. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night in 18 months. I panic every time he cries because I think it means something's wrong, something I should have prevented. My in-laws think I'm incompetent, and maybe they're right. Maybe I am." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were desperate and raw. "My wife died because I wasn't paying attention. I won't let that happen to him. And the only time I can breathe is when you're near him. The only time I feel like maybe I'm not destroying everything is when I watch you love him." Olivia felt something inside her shift, realign, reorganize. She'd spent so long protecting her heart, so long keeping people at arm's length because her ex had made her feel small, had convinced her that loving someone powerful would always mean losing herself. But looking at this man, at this wealthy, powerful, completely broken man, she realized something fundamental. Love doesn't work the way she'd convinced herself it did. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "My ex was powerful, rich, important, and he made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I would never be enough. For a long time, I believed him." Stephen turned to face her fully. "But watching you look at your son, watching you break apart because you're afraid of failing him, that's not a man trying to control someone. That's a father trying to save his life. That's different." She paused, gathering courage. "I'll take the job, but only as his caretaker. We need to be clear about that." Stephen closed his eyes, and she could see the relief washing over his features like a wave. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We haven't even started." The Hamiltons arrived on a Tuesday, without warning. Olivia had been with the family for exactly 1 week. She'd settled into the guest house on Stephen's massive property, had established routines with Ethan, had begun to understand the intricate choreography of the baby's needs and preferences. She was making breakfast when the doorbell rang, a bell that sounded more like a symphony than an alert, and Stephen's expression shifted from calm to tense in the space of a heartbeat. Margaret Hamilton entered the kitchen like she owned it, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her jewelry understated but undoubtedly expensive. Lewis Hamilton followed, his expression stern and disappointed in the way that rich old men seem to have perfected over centuries. "Stephen," Margaret said, her eyes immediately finding Olivia. "We need to discuss this situation." There's nothing to discuss, Stephen replied, his voice cooling several degrees. Olivia is Ethan's nanny. She's exceptional at her job. She's here. She's living on your property, Lewis observed, his tone suggesting this was somehow scandalous. In the guest house, Olivia interjected quietly. I maintain professional boundaries with. Who are you exactly? Margaret turned to her, and her eyes carried the weight of generations of power and privilege. I don't believe we've been introduced. Olivia Johnson. I'm a pediatric nurse at St. Catherine's, and I'm caring for Ethan. A pediatric nurse who lives in my grandchild's home, Margaret said carefully. How very convenient. Stephen stood, and the kitchen seemed to shrink around him. Is there a reason you're here? We're concerned about the boy, Lewis said bluntly. Your behavior has become erratic. You were emotionally unstable after Catherine's death. Now you're hiring strangers to live in your home. We think it's time we considered custody alternatives. The words hung in the air like a threat. Olivia felt Stephen stiffen beside her, felt the moment something in him crystallized into protective fury. Get out, he said quietly. Stephen, Margaret began. Get out of my home. Get out of my life. And if you file for custody, I will destroy you in court. I have resources you can't imagine, lawyers who would claw their way through your entire estate. And most importantly, I have a son who chooses to be with me, who chooses to be with Olivia. If you push me, I will make sure you spend every dime you have and still lose. The Hamiltons exchanged looks, calculated, worried, aware that they'd underestimated him. You're not thinking clearly, Margaret said coldly. That woman is gone, Stephen interrupted. And so are you. After they left, Stephen found Olivia in Ethan's nursery, where she was arranging his evening bottle. His hands were shaking. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I'm sorry they threatened you. I'm sorry they came here with that kind of. It's okay, Olivia said, though it wasn't, not really. She could feel the complications spiraling outward, could sense that something fundamental had shifted. Stephen reached out and took her hand, and the contact sent an electric current through her nervous system. You don't have to stay, he said. If this is too much, if they frighten you. I'm not frightened of them, she said. And she realized it was true. She was frightened of something else entirely. She was frightened of how easily she could fall for this broken man, how easily his desperation could become her calling, how easily she could convince herself that saving him was the same as loving herself. Stephen's thumb traced circles on her wrist. Then why do you look so scared? She should have pulled her hand away. She should have re-established boundaries. Instead, she said, because I think I'm starting to feel something I can't afford to feel. He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat radiating off his body. What are you feeling? Like this is a mistake, she whispered. Like I'm going to get hurt. I won't hurt you, he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I swear to God, I won't hurt you. You might not mean to, she said. But power always hurts someone. Before he could respond, Ethan woke with a cry, and the moment shattered like glass. Over the next month, the line between professional and personal blurred into something neither of them could define. Olivia and Stephen fell into a rhythm that felt less like employment and more like a partnership. They were a unit, Stephen, Ethan, and Olivia. Mornings started with Stephen watching her feed the baby. Nights ended with their fingers brushing as they both reached for the baby monitor. Every mundane moment became charged with a tension that grew more unbearable with each passing day. Then one morning, Olivia found photographs of herself on the cover of a celebrity gossip magazine. Asterisk new mystery woman in billionaire's life. Asterisk the headline screamed. There were paparazzi photos of her leaving the mansion with Ethan, of her at the grocery store, of her at the hospital. Someone had identified her, connected the dots, and weaponized the information. Stephen found her staring at the magazine in the kitchen, her face pale. Ignore it, he said immediately. It's nothing. Tabloid garbage. I didn't sign up for this, Olivia said quietly. My family is going to see this. My coworkers are going to see this. People are going to think. They'll think what? Stephen asked, and there was a possessive edge to his voice that should have frightened her, but didn't. They'll think you're important to me. Because you are. That's not fair. I don't care about fair. He moved closer to her. Fair would be having met you at a coffee shop, having had time to court you properly, having had months to fall in love with you without complication. But I didn't. I met you on an airplane at the worst moment of my life, and you saved me. You saved us. So I'll be damned if I let anyone make you feel ashamed about that. Olivia's heart was pounding. Stephen, a man looked at you at the grocery store. He continued, his voice low and intense. He asked you out. You said you'd think about it. How do you? She stopped. You're having me followed. I'm keeping you safe, he corrected. But I also want to know what you're going to tell him. Because I need to know if I still have a chance, or if I'm too late. The honesty of it took her breath away. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to choose me. Not because it's professional. Not because I'm your employer. Not because it makes logistical sense. I'm asking you to choose me because you love Ethan, and because... He swallowed hard. Because I'm completely falling in love with you, and I can't do this halfway anymore. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect herself, to maintain boundaries, to be sensible. But Ethan chose her first. And somewhere along the way, she'd made her own choice too. I need time, she said finally. Stephen nodded, accepting this because he had no other choice. 3 days later, someone tried to snatch Ethan from Olivia while she was walking him in the park. It happened in seconds, a car pulling up beside them, a man jumping out, hands reaching for the stroller. Olivia reacted on instinct, pulling Ethan close and running toward the playground where a police officer was stationed. The man fled, but the terror lingered like a stain. She called Stephen in tears, and he arrived before the police finished taking her statement. His face was a mask of fury and fear and something darker, something primal and protective and completely unhinged. He held her while she shook, and then he released her and made phone calls. Lots of phone calls. By evening, private security had been hired. By the next morning, his legal team had filed for full custody and a restraining order against the Hamiltons, who they determined had orchestrated the kidnapping attempt. But that wasn't all he did. He held a press conference. Olivia watched it on the television in the guest house, her hands pressed against her mouth. Stephen stood at a podium, his expression grave, his voice steady. Olivia Johnson is not the nanny, he said clearly. She is the woman my son trusts. She is the woman my son chose first, long before I did. She is the woman I am choosing to stand beside for the rest of my life, if she'll have me. And if anyone ever attempts to use her against me, if anyone ever tries to hurt her, they will deal with every resource I have. The press erupted. Olivia felt something crack open inside her chest, something she'd been carefully protecting for years. Everything she'd built to keep herself safe shattered in that moment, torn apart by the simple act of a man declaring publicly, unequivocally, that she mattered. She walked to the main house without thinking, drawn by something beyond logic or fear or self-preservation. Stephen was still in his study, watching news coverage of his press conference, when she entered. You shouldn't have, she started, but he pulled her close before she could finish. I know, he said, but I'm done playing it safe. I'm done pretending this is anything less than everything. She kissed him because she couldn't help it, because protecting her heart suddenly seemed less important than risking it for this broken man and his perfect son. A week later, a second attempt was made to take Ethan, this time from the school where Stephen had enrolled him in an early childhood program. But this time, security was ready. The man was arrested. The Hamiltons' involvement was documented. The legal case became a slam dunk. When the judge ruled in Stephen's favor, awarding him full custody with no visitation rights for Margaret and Louis, Stephen simply nodded and thanked his lawyers. What he cared about was winning custody in a different way. That evening, he found Olivia reading to Ethan before bed. The baby was curled against her chest, his tiny thumb in his mouth, his eyes growing heavier with each page. Move in with us, Stephen said from the doorway. Not as the nanny, as Ethan's mother, as my partner, as my wife, eventually, if you want that. Olivia set the book down carefully. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intention, he said. I'm not going to do this halfway anymore. Either you're all in, or we're both living a lie. She looked at their son, because somehow, somewhere in these past weeks, Ethan had become their son, and she looked at this man who'd learned how to be vulnerable, how to ask for help, how to love someone beyond his own pain. I'm all in, she said quietly. The moving boxes arrived 3 days later. Olivia packed up the guest house, folding her old life into containers and carrying it into the main house, into Stephen's bedroom, into a life she'd never imagined she'd have. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home. One morning, about 2 weeks after she officially moved in, Olivia woke to find Stephen already up, holding Ethan, watching the sunrise from the bedroom window. The baby was babbling softly, his little fists opening and closing in the way that meant he was waking up. "Good morning," Stephen whispered, and she wasn't sure if he was greeting her or the baby or both. She wrapped her arms around them, completing the circle, and kissed the top of Ethan's head. "Good morning," she echoed. "Say it," Stephen said softly. "Say her name, buddy. You know who this is." Ethan's eyes found hers, and his face broke into that enormous smile that had characterized the past weeks. He opened his mouth, and the word came out garbled but unmistakable. "Mama." Stephen pulled her closer, and she could feel him trembling slightly. "He chose you first," he whispered against her hair. "I'm just following his lead." "And I choose you both," Olivia said. "Both of you. That's what matters now." Through the window, the sun continued to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold and orange, the colors of new beginnings, of second chances, of a family formed not by biology but by choice. A billionaire who learned to break, a nurse who learned to risk, and a baby who taught them both that the only thing worth fighting for was love. If this story got your heart racing, smash that like button and subscribe to see more stories about love, loss, and redemption. Comment below, would you risk everything for the right person? And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.